Governor Scott Walker defeated the recall attempt in Wisconsin, where Democrats outnumbered and outgunned. We're talking about that and more with Congresswoman Karen Bass of California, Dr. Chris Metzler, political scientist at Georgetown University, looking mighty golden this week. Obama 2012 pollster, Cornell Belcher, with the Undertaker look. And, of course, political commentator Lenny McAllister. This is his first time on the panel. And, Lenny, whenever you come on the show, we do pocket squares on the show, just letting you know. So, for future reference, flag lapel pin, that's cute, but pocket squares work. All right, let's get right to it. Democrats, lots of whining this week after what took place in Wisconsin. They were saying, oh, we got outspent, we got outgunned. To me, that's what happens in politics. Guess what? You raise a lot of money or you don't, and this is what happens. To me, it sounds like it's sour grapes. You deal with it. You lost.
Well, wow, that's a lot. But here's the thing. At some point, you question whether or not the recall should have taken place. You had, the vast majority of voters in Wisconsin didn't agree with the recall even taking place.
So you think a lot of folks who voted were mad with the recall itself, as opposed to it really being?
That was clear from.
I don't like him. I don't like.
That was clear from the polling, and you look and you talk to voters, and the thing was, if I want to fire Scott Walker, I can do that in 2 years. What's this recall thing about? But it was good for Republicans in this way. They got an early run on how they're going to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars, and sort of try to completely take out their opponents through all this money and all this negative advertising. And unfortunately, as a political professional, I know negative advertising works. And when you outspend your opponent 8-1, it's going to have an impact.
But here's the thing. It also goes back to people were running against Scott Walker. And what are you going to have in 2012? People running against President Obama. It's not going to be the same dynamic for Republicans. And that's something that conservatives have to make sure that we don't get locked into. If we think it's going to be the same formula from Wisconsin and that's going to be a template for the rest of the nation, it's not going to be, because you don't usually vote out a president because you're that angry. The same way you couldn't vote out this governor because people were quote-unquote so angry.
Congresswoman Bass, a lot of Democrats are complaining, saying that we need to get money out of the politics. Many of them, Russ Feingold, former senator from Wisconsin, he says, look, forget the whole super PAC money. Look, I get idealistic. I get what a stance in terms of being about purity. But here's the reality. It's legal. It's the law. So Democrats are going to have a choice. Either you're going to raise the money like the Republicans, or you're going to get outgunned and you're going to be complaining after the fact when you lose.
Well, I think, first of all, we're going to raise the money. We have to. I mean, I don't want to see the super PACs there. I hope that we're able to pass legislation that at least forces the people who are funding it to disclose. But on the other hand, until then, we have to raise the money. I think a couple of things about Wisconsin also. Number one, we can't neglect the fact that it looks like we're going to win the Senate. And I think that was very important in terms of the Wisconsin election. I know that there's one that they're still deciding. But maybe the voters in Wisconsin decided they didn't want to go to the way of California. I mean, look how it worked out for us.
In terms of the recall of Governor Gray Davis.
Exactly.
Arnold Schwarzenegger came in and became governor.
Right, because I think that the folks in Wisconsin, as I understand the exit polls, were saying that he didn't commit a crime. So why are we recalling him? Now, needless to say, I wish the recall would have succeeded. But I think as long as the super PACs are out there, the Democrats have to match the money dollar per dollar.
I'm glad you brought up super PACs, Chris. I saw Democrats saying that, this was a good night for President Obama, because according to the exit polls, according to the exit polls, it showed 53-42, the folks who voted will be supporting President Obama. But the same exit polls that night said it was going to be 50-50. If I'm a Democrat, I'm throwing the exit polls out and I'm saying, look, act like we're the underdog, that we need to fight, and not be complacent and somehow think that, we got an 11-point difference. It's going to be okay in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I think this whole idea of looking at Wisconsin as having these far-reaching impacts in the fall, I just think is folly. I mean, by the time we get to the fall, I think you're going to see a completely different campaign. And as Lenny said, this is a completely different campaign, particularly for conservatives. So we can't sit there and say, okay, so now we know what the formula is. No, we don't know what the formula is. And I think, in fact, it's going to be an extremely different campaign. And frankly, I think by November, folks would have forgotten about this whole recall thing anyway.
Cornell, the other wake-up call for Democrats is that you can't rest on your laurels and understand this is going to be a tight election.
Well, yeah, I think so the Obama campaign and been saying it's going to be a tight election. I mean, Axelrod even said it's going to be, Titanic.
But here's the deal. I'll tell you, when I'm talking about this on Facebook and Twitter and other forums, listening to talk radio, I'm hearing Democrats say, oh, no, we're going to win going away in November. And I'm going, hey, y'all going to realize what's happening in the country.
Actually, this is probably, and it came from the Republican primary. If you look at sort of qualitative research that was going around during the Republican primary, a lot of voters were scratching their heads going, looking at this cast from Sugar Daddy Herman Cain on through, looking at this cast and going, there's no way any of these cats can really be serious about being president. And I think they sort of went to sleep. I think we have, as Democrats, our job is to wake up these voters and say, look, no, this is the same country that elected George Bush, well, at least one time. Exactly. So we cannot go to sleep on this and think that this race is over.
On Friday, President Barack Obama held a news conference trying to change the story. Did not have a good week when it came to the economy. Last week's job numbers. Also, President Bill Clinton didn't help either. And so another week of a surrogate not really staying on message. In this case here, the president has to speak to the issue of what's happening in Europe because we are now seeing a drop there. If Europe gets worse, that's going to have a negative impact on this economy, which also could impact his reelection. Lenny.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, which is part of the reason why you're seeing some of these other fringe issues come into play, why gay marriage is coming into play, why some of the other things that we've been talking about that have been outside of the economy has come into play. Now, Governor Romney can't wade down those waters. And some of the other conservatives, that's what sunk, for example, Rick Santorum just a couple of months ago. He took the bait. Governor Romney's going to have to make sure he doesn't take the bait. And I think a lot of Americans are going to focus on this and say, as this European crisis is out there, something that they don't really understand, as it starts impacting us here on the homeland, what is President Obama going to do to spin it, to bring it to his advantage? And what is Governor Romney going to do to keep people focused on the economy moving forward?
Well, really quickly, a couple things. One is that I think Rick Perry was Rick Perry's biggest problem. But that aside, no, I'm going to push back on this idea that President Obama had some sort of horrible week. The job numbers weren't great, but how many jobs was he losing when he put his hand in that Bible?
And overall, the net increase was 69,000.
Straight months of positive job growth. And when you talk about Europe, look at what's in fact happening in Europe. 11, 12% unemployment. You got voters in the capitals of Europe taken to the streets protesting. And by the way, a lot of those austerity measures that Boehner and would have you put in place here in this country, Clinton hit it right on the nose. If we want what Europe's got, just double down on what Republicans are talking about. If you think, and by the way, if we had 11% unemployment here in this country like we had in Europe, we would have a revolution, and the black unemployment would be 30%.
But it's not just the issue of unemployment in Europe. That's only part of the issue. The other part of the issue in Europe is the constant reliance on the state as the be-all and end-all. So it's a combination of that.
Yeah, but Chris, here's the deal. Okay, that's Europe's problem.
Right.
Our problem with what's happening in Europe, if you have a slowdown of buying of goods, that impacts what happens in this country.
Absolutely.
And that is going to have a negative impact on our economy. Right. Congresswoman, we're seeing a slowdown in China as well. Right. If you all of a sudden have India, China, Europe slowing down, we're going to see our economy have a difficult time.
Right, and one thing that we have to always talk about is what is the role of Congress? This Republican-led Congress and what they are proposing, there's a lot of things that we could have done to bring about jobs. But number one, we are rarely in session. Number two, there are...
When do y'all work? Everybody else working. I mean, is Congress unemployed?
Well, the ideological battle that's going on in Congress is what is the role of government? If you don't believe the government plays a significant role, why do you need to be in session in Congress?
Hold that thought. I want to come back because I want to know, this is what Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party should be together. Get the hell back to work.